Alrighty. Hey everybody, welcome back to my show. This is Brandy J and Voices of Courage Walk the Talk. Today I have with me a very cool, because we talk about this a lot, a very cool guest by the name of Sunil Godse.
Godse. Yeah, got
Yay!
it. You got it. You got it, Brandy.
How are you?
I'm doing amazing. It's been a fantastic day. This is probably my fifth podcast today. I've just been on a tear.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Well, I hope you enjoyed them all.
Yes, yes. I mean, some of them are like just sort of small ones, or just catching up on calls that are sort of pre calls. But just happy to share my story and just get this thing called intuition, get people to understand what it really is and how to live your life by it.
Yes, yes. It's just like I feel like sometimes there's no coincidences because that's been on my mind. And I'll tell people like I know that means something. Our intuition, we should trust it more. It's telling us something. And
Yes.
then I come across you. So first most, I guess you can start by you letting our listeners know who you are because I know you have a podcast called the Intuitionology Podcast.
That's right. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So my name is Sunil Godse. I'm CEO and founder of Intuitionology. And what I've done is I've taken a super deep dive into understanding what this thing called intuition is, this sort of intangible thing. And because of the stuff that I've been in through the past, which really kind of gave me the oomph to figure it out, it's a lot more complex than we think. And so as much of us talk about intuition and we say, trust my gut, or I always trust my intuition, they're more like social media memes, and people still have a hard time walking the talk, as you call it. And I'm here to show you how to walk that talk rather than just talk the talk.
I like that. It's good stuff right there. I like how you like walk talk thing. Okay. Okay. So what I would like to know is what what set you on that like path to tap into like your intuition and realize what it was.
Yeah, a lot of it came from, well, the start of this really came from after I wrote my first book, Fail Fast, Succeed Faster. And when the premise of that book was really about, if I interviewed a bunch of executives or business people or entrepreneurs on why they failed, and if you were to read their lessons, then you shouldn't fail. I mean, you should be able to succeed faster. And that's why I called it Fail Fast, Succeed Faster. And when I used to go on stages to talk about this, the one question I kept getting from entrepreneurs is that, give me the one thing that's going to help me just boost my business. And so at that time, I rolled my eyes saying, well, if that was one thing, I'd give you a cue card and it'll be like a one slide presentation. That's why I have a 400-page book. But when I went back to the audio recordings, 80 to 90% of the business executives were using some form of, I knew I should have trusted my intuition. I should have trusted my gut. I knew what the right decision was, something like that. And so when I took that a bit further to say, okay, how come I can't define it then? So by that time it was like voices from God, cosmic phenomena, meditation. And that, although I respect people who see intuition that way, that didn't resonate with me. So I dove in and looked at one person who talked about signals, because I used to get these signals. And when I referred back to kind of my life, I remember intuition hitting me when I was 5 years old. And when I was five, I remember there was these video games that I wanted to buy, and my dad said they were too expensive. And so there's a voice told me to go door to door, and that's exactly what I did. I raised $200. $100 went to my dad, and the other $100 went to charity because it made me feel really good. And then throughout my life, there's these sort of breadcrumbs of being an entrepreneur. And then I also remember the times that I ignored my intuition because they seemed to be a lot more prominent. And for those watching, I'm a South Asian male. And so given my background, there's really four doors of careers that you're kind of groomed for. It's doctor, lawyer, engineer, or failure. That's it. And so I picked door number 3, which was engineering, and I became the engineer, even though something was telling me that I needed to be the entrepreneur. But I ignored that, and I really didn't enjoy the career. In year 2 of the career, I got a chance to become a private investor in a Mexican restaurant chain. And pretty soon I was making 5 times more in dividends doing that than working full time in engineering. And so in year 3, I quit. I lost my relationship with my dad. But I was happy, and I made close to about 20 million in revenues from running a number of businesses. Ended up moving into management consulting, and there was a big contract I got in Silicon Valley, and it was amazing, like lots of money. But the contract terms kept changing, and again, something was telling me to back away from the contract. And I was so emotionally tied to the contract that I ended up going down there, and the company didn't pay me. And I came back with about 25 cents in my bank account. And perhaps the most devastating was a time that I was in engineering in university, and I had a good friend of mine reach out to me to try and get some advice. She was being stalked at the time, and she said, "Sunil, I really need your advice." And so again, something was telling me to meet with her that afternoon, and I said, "Well," I ignored that something. So let's meet a couple of days later. And the very next day, that same fellow that was stalking her walked up to her in a bus shelter and put a bullet through her head. And now I'm really interested in finding out about intuition, because now I've lost both time, money, effort, and now a good friend because I ignored this something. And so because I couldn't find out what this definition was that really resonated with me, as I mentioned earlier, there was these signals. So I talked to an international psychic who talked about signals, who I knew in my social media, kind of in my following. And she talked about these signals, and she talked about intuition being energetic in nature, and that there was really kind of no research. And I like that energy, that energetic part of it, because as an engineer, we understand things like steel, for example, has a mass-like property and has like an energy or wave-like property. So I kind of started seeing intuition as sort of this art and science. The art part now I have with these signals, but I was just really baffled as to like, why is there no science? Like it's happened to me. Now I've got all these executives talking about it. So there's got to be some science. And so I went to talk to a neurologist who was a colleague of mine. And I interviewed him, and he's absolutely said, yes, it absolutely exists. There's a lot of neurons in the gut, and it short circuits the brain. He says we all have a sixth sense, and he said that there's a lot more neuroscience research showing that it actually comes. It starts even before we're consciously aware of it. So that really piqued my interest, and so I said, okay. So he's saying there's some research into it. Let me look at the research. And so when I did, wow, I found tens of thousands of articles. One of the things that I thought was that since I heard intuition when I was 5, perhaps I'm born with it. And one paper showed that infants as young as 2 months old have been shown to have intuitive capabilities, or they called it intuitive physics in this paper. And then the reason why I struggled with the definition is because your intuition actually hits the primitive part of your brain called the amygdala. And there's no language around that. It's just fight or flight. It just knows think, feel, trust. That's it. And because there's no language, I had to define intuition myself. And so you would have your own definition. I'd have my own definition. Those watching or listening will have their own definition. We can all be similar, but we all kind of have our own definition. It's because we make up that definition. And so that made sense. And then the neurologist who was talking about intuition happening much earlier than we think, I found a paper that showed that intuition happens on average 7 to 10 seconds before we actually make a decision or take action. And so it's getting, the research now I've heard is as early as 23 seconds. It's about to be published, from what I hear from a colleague. So this is happening much earlier than we think. And so now I've got this intangible thing that is subconscious in nature, and it is now backed by science. And so all I understood, though, was that there was these signals, and I didn't understand how it really worked. So what I did is I interviewed over 1,000 people. And if I look at what these signals tell us, there's 2 types of signals, positive and negative. The positive signals are the ones that are telling us to make the right decision. So for me, it's like a feeling of flow or the dots connecting. I had one CEO who actually sees omens, like he sees this thing come up on the right shoulder. There's no color, no shape, but all he knows is that whatever he's doing, if he's doing a business deal or hiring someone and this omen pops up, He just stops and says, absolutely yes. And so that's how unique it is for him. And then negative signals are ones that warn you that you're about to make a bad decision. And one of the things with negative signals is that it actually starts very subtle in nature. And these are the ones that we actually miss because they're really, really subtle. And so what happens is as these subtle signals, you start to ignore them, they get louder and louder and change so that it's telling you, listen, I'm trying to tell you something here. You better listen. And the problem is by that time, we would have made a number of bad decisions. And so we have to be very careful in that we have to figure out what our signals are. And it's important that we identify exactly what they are. And so those are positive and negative signals. Mine are really that sort of something's off, or I get that gut feeling. And I even had one entrepreneur I interviewed, and he was saying, he says, Sunil, I don't know what my signals are, but as he kept talking about the failures that he had, he kept grabbing his left earlobe. And he says, Sunil, I just realized that my intuitive signals, when I'm ignoring it, my left earlobe gets hot. And he now remembers when he went into the ventures for the wrong reasons, for money or fame, his left earlobe got hot. As he's talking to his wife about those ventures, his left earlobe got hot. So that's how specific these signals are. And the way that I look at intuition, how it behaves, is that it's like you're driving a car. And so when you drive a car, you don't need to know what's under the hood. You just need to press the button or turn the keys, and you hear the whir of the engine. Those are your signals, and you drive off. I'm nerdy in that I really want to find out what's under the hood. And so what I found out is that there's actually 4 types of intuition that work together in a split second. And they send you the signals. And so the best way I can show you how these 4 intuitive types work is through a non-believer. So one of my colleagues was an investment banker. So this guy, like data, spreadsheets, that rules everything in his life. So as I told you before, at the time, we're talking about voices from God and things coming from the cosmos. So when you define intuition from that perspective, that doesn't match what it's so far from what he thinks. And so he didn't think that intuition existed if that's what intuition was. And so he says that intuition really, Sunil, is like data, learning, experience. And I said, well, John, actually, and we're now starting to get into one of the 4 types. One of the first of the 4 types is called experiential intuition. And if you look at your brain like a library, the subconscious part is like an iceberg. Pardon me. The subconscious part of the iceberg is the 90% underwater. The conscious part, which is the 10%, is above water. And so what happens is, from birth, we have all these experiences around us. So every single day, our intuition is picking up these experiences and putting them in the subconscious area of our brain, like a library. And so the minute that it tells you about a decision that you need to make, it's plucking all the experience, both formal and informal, all the learning, both formal and informal, the good, the bad, and the ugly, of all the experiences you've had. And for that particular decision, it's only going to pluck the experiences that are relevant to that decision. So when it gives you a signal and it says yes, it means that you've already got the raw talent to make that decision. If it's giving you a signal to say no, what it's saying is that it's seen something in your past that would have gotten you into a bad decision by ignoring this negative signal. So that's how it works. And so in some cases, your intuition goes against the data. And so John's now saying, oh, well, that's interesting, Sunil. I've got an example of that. And so what John used to do is, if you look at things like McDonald's or Burger King, Dairy Queen, those kind of things, they're franchises. And so for John, when he was putting a franchise location, because that's the business he was in, his team would use a benchmarking system. So out of 10, a good McDonald's location, for example, is a 9 out of 10. Anything below that, he wouldn't. And there was this one area of Toronto, Canada, he was looking at, and his team looked at it, and it was a 5.5 out of 10, not even close to a 9. Yet now we're getting into the second of 4, called situational intuition, where John walks into the situation in that area of Toronto, and he looks around and he says, you know what? Something is telling me that we should put this franchise here, even though it was a 5.5 out of 10. And he ended up telling his team to put a franchise there. And that franchise and location ended up being called the Beer Market. And that was the most successful franchise opportunity under his portfolio of franchises. So now John's kind of getting it. And now he's starting to use the word intuition. He says, perhaps it's intuition. I'm not sure. And we start talking a little bit more. And then what happens is John's purpose changes. He's telling me that instead of being an investment banker, he now wants to run an actual business. And so now we're going to talk about the third of the four, called relational intuition. What relational intuition does is it filters all the relationships to only allow the ones close to you who are there for your purpose, for what you want to do. They're not yes people. These are people who are going to be there for the ups and downs in life, but they'll give you good constructive criticism, but they really care about what you want, what your purpose is. And John's purpose changed from being a investment banker to now wanting to run a business from the ground up. All the people that were concerned about money, fame, ego, security, high-end restaurants, limousines, private jets, all of them told him he was nuts. And none of them bothered to ask him why he was making that decision. None of them. The only person who really cared about his purpose was his wife. And so now he turns to his wife, looks at her in her eyes, and says, you know what? This just feels right. There's this intuitive signal. Now I've taken a non-believer to talking about not only intuition, but recognizing the intuitive signal. And the last of the four is called creative intuition. That's the ultimate one that makes the decision from the other three. Now, you would think that John, who's had years of experience running businesses, would pick a restaurant or a business that would have healthy revenues, good cash flow, and strong balance sheet. But his intuition picked a tiny, almost bankrupt little restaurant. And that restaurant ended up being something called Eastside Mario's, location number 1. And he grew that to over 1,000 locations in the 20 years, $2 billion in revenues, all because it felt right. And that's the power of intuition.
Wow. I knew it was real.
It's absolutely real. Absolutely real.
Like you said, you just gotta see it's connecting now, because I always knew it's like you have to, there's something, how do you trust, you know what I mean, how do you understand it? And I've always, known that it wasn't gonna, I felt like it was always not told to us, or like we were purposely told, oh, don't trust that, like, like, don't, somebody knew, like, don't trust your intuition. That means or they probably didn't even use that word. They were just like, yeah, that, or make you seem like you're crazy, or something like that, but never like how you're saying, like, no, that is, because intention is a feeling. It's like something there.
Absolutely. And what happens when you get, so there's a couple of things that happen when people say, I don't trust other people's intuition. One is that they don't realize that they're not actually talking about intuition. They're talking about something else. And there's sort of 4 intuitive hurdles that I talk about. And I'll go through them very, very quickly. One is being too emotional. So when we get into relationships, even though our intuition is telling us to leave, we get that feeling that this is over. This is not second chances anymore. This is like third, fourth, fifth chances. We ignore that. We use self-talk to stay in. The other one is being too rational. And like me being the engineer, I drank the East Indian Kool-Aid. I became the engineer. I was too rational, even though my intuition was saying, Sunil, you're meant for entrepreneurship. The third is ego. And there's 2 sides to ego. One side is narcissism, where you're full of yourself. And the other side is following the herd, or latching onto people because maybe they have a brand name, maybe they're cool, maybe they know somebody famous. These are people that are so far away from our values that your intuition is saying, you got to get rid of that person. Yet we still latch onto them. And the last one is fear. And fear, there's 3 kinds: fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of failure. And so when someone talks about don't trust your intuition, what they're actually really referring to is you're actually making a decision based on one of those 4 intuitive hurdles. I'll give you a very good example. Mark Metry, he has the Humans 2.0 podcast series. It's one of the top 100 on Apple iTunes. And he came on to my podcast series as a guest. And he started trying to tell me that intuition led him down the wrong path. So he developed social anxiety, and he ended up almost wanting to take his own life in high school. So as he's telling that story, He says he developed social anxiety. He felt that he needed to fit in, and he kept lying and lying and lying. And because he lost his identity, he was so far away from who he actually was that he almost took his own life. So one of the things I told him is, as because I listened very intently, and I said, "Look, Mark, when you started telling me that story, one of the first things you said, or the first thing you said after you told me that intuition sometimes leads you down the wrong path, was I knew I shouldn't have lied, but when you said that, your intuition was already telling you through the story you're telling me that you shouldn't have lied, but you did." And so that's one of the reasons why people say that. The other reason why people talk about intuition, and we're now getting into walking the talk, which is really important, is that it's a buzzword. I trust my gut. I trust my intuition. But people don't know what they're talking about because they're not in tune with their signals. They think that they're just being confident. And to really trust your signals, it means you got to do the work to figure out what those signals are. And so a great example is one fellow I met, Hal Eisenberg. He was in the mindset space. He loved mindset, and I was in the intuition space. So there's a natural intersection there. And he heard me speak, and he actually didn't realize that intuition had signals, and he didn't realize that there's 4 types of intuition, and he didn't realize that there were intuitive hurdles. And he says, "Wow, like that's I didn't know about these signals." And so a year after he hears me speak, he starts developing a cough, and he develops an intuitive signal, and he decides to ignore that. And he continues to cough, and he continues to ignore his intuitive signals. What he didn't realize is he contracted COVID-19, and he ended up in a New York hospital fighting for his breath. And there was a time, it was a life or death moment, and he actually wanted to die. And he said it was the clearest signal from intuition came at that moment that came to him to say, "You are not done yet. Your voice needs to be heard. Your work is not complete." He was doing some amazing things in the New York school system. And he decided to live. And that was the clearest signal that he had from intuition. And 5 days later, he came to talk to me about what had happened extensively. And he was my very first podcast guest for my Intuitionology podcast series. And there's no better way to start a podcast on intuition than that example. And so what he realized is that he might have been talking about, I trust my gut, I trust my intuition, but he would get these signals, or he'd talk about something, and then he would either ignore the signals, or he'd say something and he'd do something different. He was not living it. He was not walking his talk. And I find many people are doing this, because you put it on social media. Sounds cool. There's lots of hearts, lots of likes, but you have no clue what you're talking about because
it's like a trend now.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's great to have those memes and themes, and it's great to have that kind of stuff on social media, but you should be knowing what you're talking about, right? And so what I'm trying to do is saying, well, it's a lot more complex than we know. Nobody's really kind of done this much deep work in it. And so what I'm trying to do is say, okay, this is actually how your specific intuition works. This has nothing to do with me. This has to be it's your subconscious phenomenon, your signals, your experiences, how you define it. All I'm doing is I'm shining a light saying this is a phenomenon that's going to help you make every single decision because there's signals here. You don't even have to know about the 4 types. Just do the work to find out what your signals are. Because when you know what those signals are, then whatever decision you make has a signal. And where you have to do the deeper work is that, especially with the negative signals. So let's say, Brandy, you and I have this common negative signal, which is that gut feeling. So let's say for you, Brandy, you've identified that as signal number 1. And that's great, because if you're going to go into a decision and your intuition saying, Brandy, no, it sends you that gut feeling, then you know to back away. But if I mistake that gut feeling for signal number 1, but for me, it's actually signal number 3, what happens is I've missed the first 2 signals that got to that gut feeling. So if I've missed signal number 1 and signal number 2, I've made 2 bad decisions. And if I made 2 bad decisions, either I'm going to stub my toe or I could be headed for bankruptcy. I just don't know how bad those decisions were. And so this is where you really need to spend the time to figure out what are your intuitive signals, and spend as much time as you can to getting every single signal under the roof that you can identify.
Wow. Would you say meditation is like probably pretty much the a great way of going about that?
Meditation is one. So it all depends. So there's something I call an intuitive medium. And so it's basically, what do you do to cut out the noise, and really have just all the, like, the social media is not coming in, you're not working on anything. Meditation is a great place because you're actually, I mean, initially it's almost like you're forcing yourself to sit quietly and allow, and then your mind's going to go, but over time you can just focus on those thoughts. And so that's a great place to do that. So for me, for example, in the shower, I'll be taking a shower, all of a sudden, boom, I'll get intuitive thoughts, and it's just that everything peels away, and it's just thoughts. When I'm driving long distances, I can have the radio on, or a podcast. I can have people screaming in the background if there's people in my car, but I'm just zoned out, right? So meditation is definitely one for a lot of people. If that works for them, it could also work in combination with something else. It all depends on what, again, this is specific to everybody else. So some people go for walks, some people cycle, some people swim. Before I go to bed, or in the middle of the night, sometimes I'll wake up and I'll get intuitive thoughts. And so it's very, very specific to each single person, and you have to figure out what that is. So even if it's a shower for me, Brandy, it could be a shower for you, or it may not be, right? So it all depends upon how much investigation you do to figure out where do you get those thoughts.
Very true. So I have a multitude of places, but like you said, I have to do the work. I just can't be like, oh, I know, because
Yeah.
I think I'm trying, it's making sense, but I know that I'm always thinking and stuff, and then they'll come out of nowhere, and then and I can zone out. Like, it could be a room full of people, and I can totally not hear them if I want to. So that's why I'm never bothered by a lot of people being around. So I can go there and not even notice anything.
Absolutely. And you've got to figure that out for yourself. But when you put yourself there, then you can think about, what decision you're about to make. And then those signals will come very, very clear. Either it's the right decision or it's the wrong one. And when you've done the work on the intuitive signals, as I said, you'll know right away.
Wow. So basically, there's no going wrong with with your intuition. It's just because it's like it's going to be wrong or it's going to be right, and that's what it is. No confusion there. So
there's
which one you listen to?
There's no confusion, and it hits you right away. There's no extra brain processing. There's no extra hoops it has to go through. It hits you at the primitive part of the brain, and it's binary. You're either going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, or you're going to make a decision, and that's it. It's very, very simple.
Is that flight or fight? Yeah.
Fight or flight, exactly. That's what it is. And the fight is that you just kind of move on and you break through if you've got fears or things that you have to get beyond the fears, because your signal is telling you if it's fear of danger, that's one thing. Then obviously you have to run. But if it's fear because you fear the change, you fear unknown, you fear failure, if your intuition is giving you a positive signal telling you that you've already got the skills to break through that fear, then trust your intuition and break through that fear. A really good story I've got is there's a fellow by the name of David Dame who has cerebral palsy, and he's been in a wheelchair all his life. And his dream was just to have someone hold him up so that he can have the sand on a beach go through his toes with the water. And a couple of years ago, he got that opportunity. He went on vacation, and so he ended up on the beach, and so his friends lifted him up. And as soon as he starts feeling the sand, he falls flat on his face. So the embarrassment starts coming in, the fear starts coming in. And he says, Sunil, I have two things I can do right now. The first thing is I can succumb to that fear and let it drown out my intuition. And I can sit back in that wheelchair and forever regret the opportunity I have right now of turning my dream into a reality. Or I can battle my fears and trust my intuitions that's telling me, take a step. And it's telling me to take another step and take another step into the ocean. And then he points to his chin. So basically says the water gets up to the chin level. And that's when he looks back. And he hadn't realized how far he had come. So when you trust your intuition, you don't think about that big house or that car or what goals you're going to make. You live for the present moment. And one of the things I continually say is that when you take care of the inputs guided by intuition, or the steps that you need to take now, the outputs or the results of those will happen. They'll take care of themselves. What you have to do is just concentrate on the present time, present moment, and the signals. And those signals will guide you to one door of opportunity after another, after another. And even if you're in a crappy place, your intuition never leaves you. People have to hit rock bottom sometimes to appreciate intuition. And the thing with going through bad experiences one after another is that that's a slippery slope that you are going down. And we're also concentrated on looking down on the slippery slope, that we forget to look up to see the light that intuition is shining, to say, here's a lifeline, here's a rope. And a great story I have is Sarah Prout, who is 10 years in an abusive relationship, like 40 instances of abuse. And it was New Year's Eve in December 2016, I believe. And so her and her partner at the time were thinking about watching a movie. And as usual, there was an argument, and she knew where that was headed. And so she had to basically walk away, and she needed out. She absolutely needed out, but she was too afraid. She didn't know, what am I going to do? And so she goes outside and she looks to the stars, and she sees a clear signal from intuition to say, now, your time is right now. So she trusts her signal. She leaves that front door, no money. In fact, $30,000 in debt, 2 kids, and she was homeless. She had no clue what she was going to do, but she was going to trust the signals that intuition was giving her. And she was picking up furniture from the side of the roads. She was actually going to public washrooms and stealing their soap to put the pieces together so that her kids could actually have a clean shower. She was eating beans on end, but she still trusted every day. There's a signal of intuition. Things are going to get better. And one door of opportunity opened up after another. She ends up finding the love of her life on Twitter. A year and a half later, they get married. And 6.5 years later, she starts this thing called On Manifestation, and it turns into a multi-million-dollar business. And it's all because it's not the money that's important. Is that when she was down and out and thought that there was no way up, the signals kept her moving ahead and opened one small door of opportunity after another small door of opportunity. And that's how you go about life, trusting your intuition. And so she trusted that things will get better. And in her case, it got really better.
That's amazing. It kind of, I don't know if you've heard this before. It's what it sounds like, because I've been on this journey for, especially since 2020. That's what happened to me. They sat me down, and I started to realize what life was about. Shame on them, but I've been on this road, with manifestation and everything, and it's just very intriguing, and it just makes so much sense to me, and it connects dots. And then what you said right now, they had also spoke about like God and Jesus like being inside of us, and that's what, when we're talking about intuition, it kind of sounded like Jesus or God, the way they, because we always literally, it always talks about don't take the words and be, like literal, like in our own in our understanding, but
Yep.
they were saying that he's in us already. We're in his image, and then for some reason that triggered that thought of intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it all depends on how you want to define it, right? So for you, Brandy, that might be what resonates with you. For me, it doesn't, but it's not to say you're wrong or right. It has nothing to do with my opinion. I see it in the art and science way. I know it's inside me. I know it speaks to me in signals. And that's just how I see it. And it's meant to be internal. It has nothing to do with me convincing anybody else their definition is. I'm just saying that it exists. Here's the science. Right. Here's the signals. However you want to define it, here's the tool set. You define the tool.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what it is. And so we shouldn't be worried about the definitions. We should be more worried about why am I not listening to it?
Right. And we make better choices.
Yes.
Oh, shoot.
100% of the time.
Even relationships too, right? Because we had a Hers and His podcast. We're trying to figure out, you got to date, you got to do this, and stop making all these mistakes. I'm like, we're missing intuition.
Yeah. And you also have to be careful. Like, so I realized you had some issues and this and that, and you have to understand that everybody starts somewhere. Work with that other person. You never know where that discussion goes. You never know how you've helped the other person. So
Yeah.
rather than getting frustrated and saying this looks unprofessional or blah blah blah, whatever it is, you got to have some empathy, right? And
Yeah. I was
you're
hoping
trying
that.
to make it work, and we'll
Yeah.
make it work. We'll find a time. We'll go back and forth, but just make it work, right?
Yeah.
At least that's my philosophy.
Yeah.
And
I had like this
and here we
feeling
are.
that you were, but then for the other side, I was like, but you never know. Some people, but I feel that same way too because we make mistakes. We're human,
Yeah,
and that's just what it is, you know.
yeah. That's what. And I mean, we've all flawed. We've all
Hmm.
made mistakes,
Yeah.
and in some cases, we're judged by other people.
Yeah.
And when it comes to intuition, again, that filtration mechanism, sometimes we get stuck in the past because there's some trauma. And so we're stuck in that trauma. So that's something that I do to help them get out of that. And in some cases, we're trying to do something to be better than someone else in the past, or someone made a bad comment. We're going to show that person more, or somebody gave us an opinion who has no basis for that opinion, but yet we seem to live our life on that opinion. And so when we don't trust ourselves, we start living in the past. What we do in the present is because of the past, but we got to let go of those people and say, well, that's okay. That's your opinion. Good. That's you are who you are. Excellent. This is my path today. And I'm going to make decisions based on who I am and the signals I have. It has nothing to do with the past, but the majority of us are really, really living in the past and reactions from that. And then there's something I call opportunity cost, which is something that is double the cost. And so one of the stories I often tell is he's a professional. He used to be a professional magician, international, named Vin Jiang. And his career in 2016 was on a high. He was all over the world, 100,000 people a year, 80 stages. And to everybody on the outside world, he seemed like he was a wild success. But internally, he felt like he was in a crap place. He knew it. And so what happened is he took time out to say, I need to figure out what my values are. So he goes away to a place in New Zealand that has no cell phone service, nothing. It's totally isolated. And he starts putting his values up on the wall. And he looked at them, and they were staring back at him, and he's saying, well, this is not even me. Like, this is what my wife wants. This is what my kid wants. This is what society wants. This is what my parents want. This is what my friends want. Well, where am I? And he said it was, instead of this being liberating, he said this was very frightening to put that much control in his hands. So he battled that fear, got rid of those, and he started putting up the values that he wanted to show up in life. And he came back away from that experience totally ready to trust his intuition. And he falls back into the same circle of friends. He falls back into the same high-rise apartment in downtown LA, brand names and all that stuff. And his parents come, and what prompted him, 6 months, he started going back in, lost who he was. And his mother tells him, he said, there's saying in Vietnamese that when you hang around squid, at some point you're going to get some ink on you. And his mother was saying, you're hanging around too many squid, my friend. You're not my boy. And this prompted him 6 months later to redo the same exercise and finally truly give up all that crap. Live out in the woods, not in the woods, but outside the city, move back to Australia, give up friends that don't add to his life, just get rid of them. And that's what he did. He had to make we say hard decisions. They're not hard. We think they're hard. We think that we're more concerned about the consequences, thinking that it's hard, which is crap. And one of the things I talk about is something called opportunity cost. And so for Vin, I told him that, well, he says, I wasted 6 months of my life. And I said, well, Vin, it's actually more than that. It's not just the 6 months that you wasted going back to your old self, but it's also the 6 months that you wasted that you could have done a better job, or you could have lived life the right way. So it's actually 1 year of your life that you wasted. And since you're in the business of helping people, because that's what he did, how many people did you leave behind?
Ooh.
how many people did you not help? And he said, I've never thought about it like that. And it hit him square in the eyes. So when you make a bad decision, it's not just one times the cost, it's twice the cost or more. And then think about how much time you're wasting, effort, money. And don't forget, I lost a good friend. I can't bring it back.
I'm really thinking here because I know that, I have this thing since I was younger, and it's like I've been trying it, but you made it make more sense. I've never like had anybody put like science or like even like any logic to it. It's just been like trying to figure it out, Because I told my son today, I said, "Well, wouldn't it make sense that intuition is, real?" And even like I was talking about a little bit of manifestation. I said, think about it. I
Yeah.
said, if our mind talks to our communicates with our body, so wouldn't it make? I mean, as I started going somewhere where he wasn't following, he wasn't buying it, but I said that's something because just I don't know, something's going on and it's got me on this journey, and I'm here, I'm all in, I'm here for it.
Yeah, and manifestation, it all depends on how far you want to take it, how far people want to take it. So I absolutely believe in manifestation. And I've interviewed now over 1,000 people for my podcast series. And there have been a number of them who've told me that through intuition, they knew what they wanted. In fact, there was one, he's now running it's called Pure Life Organics. And it's a nutrition company. And his intuition basically said he was a police officer. And there was an opportunity, business opportunity, and his intuition was saying, okay, in 1 year's time, this is where I'm going to be with this business. This is the car I'm going to have. And there's like so many details that he had. And he was going to be on stage speaking, and he wrote it down on a piece of paper. And a year later, he totally forgot about it. And he saw this piece of paper, and he opened it up. And everything happened. He was on stage. The dollar amount, exact dollar amount, exact where his business was. And I think there was one thing that he missed, which was, I can't recall it because this was a podcast guest we published a few weeks ago. And if you look at Sarah Prout, she manifested herself from that abusive relationship. Yeah. And she talks about manifestation now. And so we also talked about what real manifestation is versus what they call junk food manifestation. And there's a lot of people on social media that are touting junk food manifestation, which is not the real thing. And so she's there to teach people the right way in terms of manifestation. But when you manifest truly, purely based on your intuition, shit happens. And it happens quickly, and it happens the way you want it to happen. And it's kind of like I told you so again and again and again. And then there's a sense of self-confidence around that.
Oh my goodness.
And so it's something that you don't have to talk to anybody about. It's not that you raise a white flag and say, I manifested this. I trust my intuition. Who gives two hoots about what happened? All you do is you enjoy the success.
You just enjoy it. I just have to say this. Okay. I don't think it's going to blow your mind, but it's definitely blowing my mind. Just exactly what you just said, right? I've always been, like you say, you don't have to tell anybody anything. You just know it. And I used to, since I was younger, I'd always said, I don't know, I just feel different. I've just been this way. Like, I just was I didn't know it was called confident or anything like that. I was just or naive. I don't know what it was, but it was working. It was fine. I was okay with it. My mom never talked about this stuff with me or anything like that, but I used to tell people if I can imagine it, right? Say for instance, I've always wanted to live somewhere with nice lights and you know what I mean, be on a balcony, or I don't want work weekends. I like jobs with weekdays, and I know I'm gonna have it. I know I got to work for it. I don't want anybody to give it to me, but I'm gonna have it. Certain things, and I would envision it. I'd be like, I can't wait. I already had it. I can't wait. Not oh man, I need that, or I got to work to get it. I'm I can't wait to get there because I knew it was meant for me. And but I never knew what that was. I just said, I know this. And then people to this day, they'll tell me like, you don't know who you are. Everybody's still trying to work on themselves. Like nobody truly knows what they want. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that is. But I said, trust me, I'm 42 years old now. And I said, I've been this way and I've always known what I wanted. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I've always known this. I know what I had a purpose. I know I was destined to help people, that I'm compassionate, and I just want to I want to change the world. And that has not changed. I want to change the world. I want to save
Hmm.
the world.
Hmm.
And that's just how it's been. It hasn't changed. And you just made it make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's just I feel sorry for those people who don't believe that, but that's not our journey. That's not my
Right.
journey. My journey is to educate. That's my purpose. Your journey is to find out what your purpose is, and
Yeah.
people can either join you on the same train, on the same track, and if they
Hmm.
don't enjoy the ride, either they miss your train, or if they're not on the same ride, they don't like the ride, get off at the next station. And if you
Right.
continue to bother me, I'll kick you off myself. And I'm
You're
very
serious, aren't
I'm very because I don't want negative energy. I don't want values that don't resonate with mine. To a degree, I'm no, nobody's perfect, and I'm not going to be looking at making friends or being around people who are an exact match. I'm just saying that if your values are so far away from mine, I don't want you anywhere close to me or my family, because those aren't the values that I want to teach my kids about. I don't want those values to taint my values, which are then telling me or guiding my purpose. My purpose is very clear and it's very strong. And either you're on the same train or you find another ticket somewhere else. I'm
you?
that strong about what I'm doing. And if you want proof, go to my website and look at the testimonials. I have a 7-day challenge. I've had close to 55,000 people through now, where they actually identify a problem and they use their intuition to solve that problem. Again, that's free. You can go to intuitionknowledge.com, grab the 7-day challenge, and let your intuition work for you to solve your problem. And you can take the sheet, and you don't have to do anything with me ever again, but you now have my sheet, which is free, which is fillable, and every single problem you use the same process with your intuition to solve every problem.
Goodness.
That's my purpose.
It's blowing
And
my mind here.
so
Goodness gracious. I feel
don't
like
let
I'm
other
talking.
people affect your purpose.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. And whoever doesn't want to come on the same train, yeah, kick them off. And if it's not the right path, then your intuition will figure out what the right path is. And if it really is a bad decision, what signal did you miss? And add that to the inventory that you of your knowledge, because you don't want to repeat that again.
Right.
So
I made
even
the
the
same choice.
failures are your friend. Your failures and your hurdles are your best friend. And even neurologically, when you have fear, when you fail, your brain, your neurons are actually rewiring and say, okay, we failed. Give me a new pathway. And they're waiting. And what happens is when we get that, we fall back into the old ways of doing things, and they come back to the same old habits. And so you don't generate any new pathways because you don't want to go through the fear. You're worried too much about other people. And then there's no wonder why your life doesn't move ahead. And then you meander in life, and by the time you hit 80, you've regretted everything. But why regret in the future? Don't have regrets today.
Right. That's why people say, "Do you regret doing that?" I'm like, "No, I use it as a lesson. Like
Of
I
course.
took good from it. And like I'm not going to just sit here and regret stuff. I'm like, what did I gain from that? Where am I at now? Where can I?
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Nothing is ever regret. Nothing. Nothing is ever regret. And when you can teach that to your kids and your son, and I teach that to my daughters, 9 and 14. And my 14-year-old is actually, because of her intuition, is running an actual nonprofit business. It's a federal incorporated nonprofit company. She's 14. She's raised over $30,000 selling her art. If you can see behind me is her art. And she supports those with disabilities and illnesses by bringing them together. And her purpose, one of the incidents she had a pop-up event. So first of all, she had a fundraiser. She doubled how much she wanted to raise in her fundraiser, 5,000. She wanted 2,500. But the purpose was very clear. And the purpose was a pop-up event. This is what happens when you put intuition in the hands of a child and you teach them about the signals and humility and being able to drive that, and being humble about it. So there was an incident where she had somebody who had Parkinson's disease, and he had come, And for those who are looking, his left earlobe is just shaking violently. And he says, Avni, come here. And he grabs a paintbrush and he dips the paintbrush in some paint and he starts to put it on canvas. And his left arm just settles. And he says, this is what your event is doing for me. So thank you so much for what you're doing. So when you have a child like that who takes intuition and the signals that they have and lives life like that, and I'm not saying there's going to be ups and downs and stuff like that. There's going to be peer pressure. She's going to be going to high school. There's going to be other pressures. And so she's going to have to manage that. But what she knows is that she can take a look. Both my daughters, 9 and 14, can take a look at their values and they can take a look at other behaviors and they can say, I don't like that person's behavior. And both of them have been able to walk away from bullying even before they got bullied.
Hmm.
And so if they're able to make that decision, saying that's not the behavior I like, those aren't values that I see, they don't get into the thick of the crap. Then they don't make as many mistakes because they avoid them ahead of time. Now, their life's not, I mean, nobody's life is perfect. But if I'm able to do that, my wife is able to give those kind of values to them now.
Yeah.
Like you may want to give to your son. Can you imagine what kind of life they're going to live?
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so for everybody listening on your podcast, you don't need to be 14 or 13 or 2. You can start now. If you're 75, you still have intuitive signals. If you're 55, you still have intuitive signals. Don't look at the past and have regrets. Start now and have a purpose. Start changing lives and do it one person at a time. You don't have to change a whole country,
Right.
but affect the people around you through what you want to do. And when you do things that you want to do, you attract those people around you that are meant to be with you, that are going to support you in the thick and thin, not the yes people, but those are the more important people. And so of the tens of thousands of people I've met, of the over 100,000 people I've probably spoken to on stages, I have 2 people that are in my inner circle, not including my wife and my kids. 2 people. And that's all I need.
I said to my son, I said, quality over quantity.
Big time. Big time. Big
Yep.
time.
So true.
And so
Wow.
that's how you live your life based on intuition. But you got to put in the time. You got to get rid of the past. You got to think about your signals. You got to maybe take the 7-day challenge, but stop living for somebody else and start living for yourself. And every day then you wake up trying to fulfill purpose, whatever that purpose is for you. It's very powerful.
It is. That's like a huge factor. Like that just might be like the whole key to life you just have right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
very much so. Wow. Do you think that okay, one that lacks imagination, because I find that imagination is very important, especially in childhood, because it helps. That's how people create awesome stuff, things, wonder. Do you think with the lack of that and suppression of that, okay, because I teach, well, now I'm out because of COVID, but I noticed that the pull away from like letting like being able to create just as they want, with not being constructed or any type of thing. Do you think that and then I notice people as adults that seem to lack it, and then they even say they don't have it, like I don't do that, I don't imagine stuff. Like what? Do you think that plays a part also too, when people just refuse to go there? Like there's some people like, I don't believe that. I'm like, well, why not? Just entertain it for a little bit.
So it could be a couple of things. One, you absolutely have to be creative, because those creative juices are what's required. I mean, that's why one of the 4 types is called creative intuition. And you sometimes, you have to step away from the data. Companies, how do you think innovation happens? How do you think creation happens? How do you think the cell phone happened? How do you think electricity happened? The stuff that you're sitting on, the plastics, the leather, the wood, how do you think that came about? And that's because people were creative in thinking outside the norm. So you can think, I don't do that, but everything around you is because somebody has done that. And so that's one. Second thing is, do they really mean that? Why are they being like that? Are they just being reactive because they don't want to give you that impression? Because they or maybe they've suppressed it and they don't know creativity the way you do it. So maybe you do it through paintings, they don't do it,
Right.
but they're creative in another way.
Yep.
Maybe they're creative in thinking about a new process at work or a new way of moving things around in the house. That's still creative. It doesn't mean that they have to be really creative in terms of like my daughter painting something on a canvas. So it's what's that definition of creativity? And and then the other thing is, yeah, impression management. Are they really saying that, or maybe they were trying to be creative when they were younger, and somebody told them that's stupid,
Yeah.
or why are you doing that? Follow the societal rules. Don't be
Well,
like that. And they
yeah.
get bullied early on because of that, and then they stamp down the creativity
Yeah.
when that creativity is the one that's going to help them move their lives ahead. So it's a bigger question without knowing that person and diving deep into why they said that. And if that's their attitude, then they have to start being creative at some level to really kind of make the decisions to move themselves away from the norm. Now, it's okay to be just who they are. If they want to work in a company and collect the 9 to 5 and come home and put their feet up and have a tea and or a beer and watch TV, and they really enjoy that process, and to them that's their definition of life,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. For me, that's not the definition of life. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a risk taker. I'm an educator. I have a purpose. So just because that's who I am doesn't mean that other person is wrong. I can't be comparative that way.
Yeah.
I have my own way of doing things. You have your own way of doing things, and that other person have their own way of doing things. And even though we may not understand what the other person is, we shouldn't judge.
Yeah.
Now,
I see the
yeah,
creativity in the person though, but they say they're not. I completely can see it.
yeah, and so I'm not sure why that person is saying it. There's, like I said, there's a whole number of reasons.
Hmm.
But again, conceptually, we shouldn't judge. Practically, I think we do.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, a lot, and we really need to move away from
Yeah.
that judgment, right? I mean, the
Yeah,
whole
that's
judgment with
negative.
even us coming on board here, right? I mean, I could have judged this like, what the hell's
It's
Brandy doing, right? We can't even like this stream doesn't work. We're missing times. We're all over the
hmm
place. I mean, I could have judged that, but
Yeah. And
I
for me, just
didn't.
thinking that right away, getting ready to give up, I must have already
Yeah,
judged you, and just instead of facing it, I just kind of, I think I flicked that upon myself to make it
yeah,
somehow make it make sense or to deal with it versus just saying like, you know what, man, I just
yeah.
screwed up. I gotta,
And
you
again,
know.
so let's say I did make that. Let's say I did make that judgment call, and I was a real idiot about it. Then that's not someone you want to have on your podcast, anyways. That's not the time you want to spend with someone with that negativity. You should be having someone else that has your same vibe and really you want to spend time with, asking some good questions, not an idiot like me who's going to judge you in that way because I'm an idiot for it. So don't feed into my idiocy by you feeling bad.
That's not the form of bullying. Think about it, or
Yeah,
manipulate, kind of like
good.
make people
Yeah,
feel bad.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
And you haven't even met me. But yet through our emails and the sense, you thought maybe I'd be a bully, right? And it was so far from the case. And so we should never. And again, if I'm going to be like that, that's not someone you want to have on your podcast show.
Yeah. And it wasn't that you gave me a sense that you were. It was myself because I knew I
Oh,
was like, damn, I messed up again. Like crap, you know. And
but
it's
that's okay.
unprofessional, and I just don't know how
Yeah.
some people are like really a stickler about that.
Well, and
So
this is how you learn, right? So now
yeah,
through that process, you've learned. Okay, let's send whatever. Now you know. So there's a process that you're refining so that it gets better and it gets
yeah.
smoother. And you learn that. Like I remember even when I first started coming on podcasts, everybody's asking me for a bio, links, and headshot, and I was just individually typing them like 4 or 5 times through and saying, "Why am I typing this every single time? Let's just do a Word document, put it on, and then I can cut and paste." But again, first few times I'm spending, oh my god, okay, 50. I mean, it's not a big deal, but it says I'm doing it again. Okay, I'm doing it again. Wow, why is it? There seems to be a common theme here. Maybe I can look at the process and make it a little bit more efficient. But
Wow,
again, same thing. You're learning, right? So surround yourself with people who are going to support that learning.
that is true. Like-minded
Which,
people, I guess.
yeah, all the time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I truly appreciate. Like, I could keep asking things, but I know you have a life, and this is like your 20,000th podcast today. It's like no, I'm gonna not gonna be selfish.
I appreciate that.
No.
Thanks.
But I thank you so much, and I would love to like have you on another time, maybe, and so because this can go so many different ways and places, and people could tap in, and because we have the answer in ourselves to a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Happy to come on another time for sure. Let me know when you want to do this again for sure. And if you want to take it whatever direction, I'm happy to answer some questions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Cute. Oh, that'll be so fun. Have people. Yeah, we can do this. People need to tap in.
Mm.
Well, I'm gonna let Sunil go to bed. No,
I've got
seriously,
some
but
Yeah, I've got some family time coming up. Yeah, but I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for doing this.
yes, no problem. Thank you for being so patient. And when this is all up and done, I'll let you know, and I'm gonna air it, and then you can show your daughter my artwork that I painted back there too.
I will let her know. I will definitely let her know for sure.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, thank you so much. But I do need you to do something really quick. Can you drop a line real quick and let the listeners know where they can find you? Email, not emails, but website and stuff, links.
Absolutely. So you can go to intuitionology.com. From that main website, there's my podcast series is intuitionology.com/podcast. And there's links to Apple, so the iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, soon to be on TikTok, no dancing. But I'll be putting some knowledge bombs there. Yeah, those are the major ones. So drop me a DM. Happy to answer any questions. And I encourage people to take the 7-day challenge. It's free. And they get a free copy of my ebook through the 7-day challenge as well. And so I'm looking forward to them really getting to know their intuition more intimately.
Cool. I'll post that up on my website. See what we can do. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, and you go ahead and you get you some rest, and I'll be talking to you soon.
You bet. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Did you want to hang? Do you want